If you followed us on Insight, we began with a series from the northeast region of Nigeria. Today we are looking at the public governance. 3 years of this government, inching towards the 4th year. I have two gentlemen. I have an investment and financial analyst, Ni Akinsiju. Thanks for joining me on Insight.
Pleasure.
Also a lawyer and deputy coordinator, Buhari Media Organization, BMO, Aliyu Abdullahi. Thanks for joining me on Insight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, gentlemen, the present administration under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari, Commander-in-Chief, Federal Republic of Nigeria, was elected under the platform of the All Progressives Congress and has clocked 3 consecutive years in office. On May 29, 2015, in his inaugural speech or address, he said the administration will focus on 3 core areas: the economy, fight against corruption, provision of security. Reading out a scorecard, the presidency says the Nigerian economy is back and is on the path of growth after the recession spanning 2016 to 2017. The scorecard maintains that the administration's priority areas and sectors of agriculture and solid minerals maintained a consistent, smooth running throughout the recession. Quite a long list. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, says the government has kept faith and fulfilled its promise to Nigerians. On the flip side, Nigerians across the divide in assessing the administration says beyond the support to the state governments, power works and housing, investment on the people, and human capacity building and institutional strengthening, the anti-corruption war is on course. Buhari has done well. Some say the administration is still groping in the dark. Some say the administration is a failure from all fronts. Some say the administration brought about change and not change. Some say the administration is work in progress. The other one says you cannot accuse Buhari of not making progress on anti-corruption. Some say people are hungry, struggling to feed. Some other people say Buhari needs to up his game. And being a government that is democratic, believes in opposition, you cannot do without opposition in a democracy. So give and take. You have seen it all. You have been there. You have seen the in and outs. Let's start. How do we assess this government from the perspective of public governance, economy? Let's take it from that perspective. Let's start from you.
It's apparent the government is returning what I call aggregated substantive scores, on the front of public governance and economy. I always try to remind people that we are coming from somewhere, and if we don't take note of where we are coming from, we will not know the value and the significance of where we are, because we could have been in worst situation. We're coming from a state or a situation that had lost control, an economy that had lost control going into 2015, and that there was a need for that economy to be stabilized. What we now have is a stabilized economy. So compare and contrast. Of course, on governance, we're also coming from a situation of near irredeemable state of corruption. Corruption in process, corruption in physical. Corruption in physical, what we call grand corruption, had become more or less institutionalized, pre-2015 May. And corruption in process had become internalized, same pre-2015 May. And what do I say? Process. Where all processes of government contracts and contracts award and all that had become truncated and abused, so much that you now have people who are supposed to be superintendent of the process being direct stakeholders in that process. And of course, the outcome is the convoluted process. So as it were, what we had then and compared to now shows a purging of the process. So to that extent, you also have a high grade. I actually scored the president excellent in the fight against corruption. In economic movement, because it is a flux, you know. The economic world is a flux. If you can have your plan and you have exogenous factors intervening, and that may even cause some distortion. But even as at that, I take pride in aligning myself with this government, because for the first time in the history of a developing economy, you had a situation where a developing economy went into recession. And by the third quarter of that recession, it has bottomed out and it was going up. Go and look at history of developing economy. I mean, what we had at that time in 2016, 2017 was a V-shaped recession. You went in straight, by the third quarter you came out, and by the third quarter of that you were out of it, you know. Most economists go into L shape, you know. They go in and it keeps going, you know, and leads to a state of what do you call it?
Depression.
You know, depression. So what I'm trying to say essentially is that at this level, when you compare to where we are coming from, the president made substantive commitment to righting the economy, to righting corruption. To that extent, we can say so far, very good.
Okay, I love your perspective. The angle I would take on Abdullah is this. When the government came on board, there was this visible fear. He's a dictator, he's not a democrat. 3 years moving on, would you say the present administration has really tolerated and leaving space for opposition? The opposition we have, is it really virile?
Well, thank you, Omini. This question is apt, especially as it is a democracy. How far has the country come in the pursuit of democracy? Now, that is a very good question. You see, the administration of President Muhammad Buhari has helped in maturing the democracy aspects of the country. Because don't forget, in this country, we have seen how past governments have handled their kind of democracies. And I'll give you an example. We have seen a past administration that uses its power to oust governors that were not on the same page with them by embarking the State House of Assemblies, the lesser number of people in those House of Assembly, to impeach sitting governors of states that are not playing ball with them. We have seen that happen from the return of democracy. We have seen where elections were truncated, rigged in favor of a ruling party that is actually at the center. But since this administration came into being 3 years ago, we have seen the ruling party APC loses election one after another, and nothing happened. Nobody uses the powers of the center, whether the security forces or any other forms of intimidation. Don't forget, the governor of Anambra, Willie Obiano, has to congratulate the president on allowing the democracy to thrive through the free and fair system of election in Anambra not very long ago. And he commended the president well. And all other elections that happen, the president doesn't involve in truncating democracy. That's to tell you this government under President Muhammad Buhari allows democracy to nurture and grow. And opposition are free. They have said, they have been talking. Nobody has stapled anyone from talking, especially from the opposition. I mean, the kind of things we have had, even when we compare with the greatest democracy in the country, in the world, like the United States. We have seen how Donald Trump of the United States, how he doesn't like people talking against him, the way he will go either, you know, some people withdrew the accreditation, the credentials of press people from the White House. But under the President Muhammad Buhari, no policeman has had his credentials being revoked. You know, even though most of the time, some of the journalists, they have written even lies, fabricated lies against the very institution they are supposed to report the true activities to people. They have done that, but they are still working. So that's to show you how democracy has so far come to be under this administration. And again, rule of law has been respected. That's the third arm, that when you talk about democracy, you have to also understand the rule of law. But the area that this executive arm can do, what it could do, is to at least recover. And they have been recovering, and this money has been channeling into development. Don't forget, let me tell you three things. Right now, as we are speaking, this month, the presidency has set up the executive arm of government a presidential initiative for infrastructure funding under the Sovereign Wealth Fund. This presidential initiative on infrastructure funding will actually consider major projects that will not be actually delayed by the process of budgeting. Among them, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the East-West Road, the Mambila Power Projects, are some of, and the second River Niger Bridge. Because of the way, the importance that this administration attached to this project, they don't want them to be, you know, delayed under the bottleneck of bureaucracy of our budgeting process. Okay. And this is democracy. This is a nurturing and growth of democracy.
Okay. Now, moving on, at the 2018 Democracy Day lecture, Peace Building and Good Governance, delivered by former INEC chairman Atahiru Jaga, Speaker House of Reps spoke, Senate President spoke, and to encapsulate what they said, yes, the journey is evolving, the journey is progressing. You can't rule out disagreements, you can't rule out misgivings, but what is the bottom line is that we are looking towards a Nigeria. So, opposition, pro, government put together, what should we do? What should we be looking at? Is it just opposing, and not seeing anything good about what the government is doing?
The whole thing has to do with institutional building. And that is why I personally respect the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. A number of Nigerians had said he's not being forceful, you know, that there had been a template of intervention by the executive, for example, in what the legislatures will do, or a template by the executive in what the judiciary will do. But in this era, for me, it's another era. You are not witnessing that. That is not being recorded. You had a situation where the legislature, for instance, had a free hand on who became whatever, you know, in the structure. Now, for me, that is institution building, and that is what we need going forward to secure our democracy and to ensure a flourishing democracy. Every arm of government should look on and secure its responsibility and mandate. Opposition is necessary, is important in a democracy. If the opposition decides this is how he or she wants to look at government, consistently and vigorously sentimental, vigorously seeing things that are bad in the government, all right, that is good. It's as long as it's not what do you call it? As it's not scandalous, not libelous, you know, and negative, you know, to bring down the government. As long as those are not involved, it's okay. I always tell people about the issue of thesis. You cannot have thesis until you have antithesis. So you must have opposition to grind issue with you before it revolves to the next level.
What if the opposition is not virile?
If the
because naturally the logic is, if there's a virile opposition, it guides the government logically.
Good.
But if the opposition is not virile, it becomes a problem, because the point is, like we say, when shall we get to the point where, if there are certain challenges in the country, we collapse politics, we collapse religion,
Good.
we collapse ethnic sentiments, and even if we must oppose, we oppose on grounds of principle.
Nationalism that's what you're saying, nationalism, where we unify ourselves against common hostility. That's nationalism. We don't have that situation yet. And if you are talking about viral opposition, it is also about the capacity of the government in power that will determine if you have a viral opposition or not. If the government in power is doing the right thing, what else would the opposition do? Because what opposition is supposed to do naturally is to provide alternatives and options. And if the alternatives you are willing to provide are not even measuring up to what the government is doing, what would you want to talk? Of course, what we see at play now is the opposition talking for the fun of talking, you know. Viral opposition, to my mind, is about taking on substantive issues and providing alternatives on the substantive issues. Oh, the economy. You are saying the expansionary budget system that this government had adopted is not right. What is the other option? You can't just talk it down. The government had come and said, okay, at the point in time, we are going to give 60% of all possible foreign exchange, transaction to manufacturing sector. Do you have anything against it? You don't have. So if those policies were wrong, yes, they can bring up alternative. But as it were, you have a government that is marshalling out policies. And this, of all the policies of this government, I've only had issues to question one. And that was way back in 2015, December or thereabout, when currency control was introduced. After then, everybody got its groove right. See, I'm telling you, and let us re-emphasize this again, that recession that we went to, under another government, we would still be into it. And in fact, we'll be digging deeper. Some of us would have even gone to the Republic of Benin or Togo by now. But we should be thankful to God that today, not only did we get out of that recession, we are now even becoming self-sufficient in strategic areas of our economy. In food, in security, in transportation, in power. How many years had Nigeria been an independent country? Since 1960 to 2014, and we're managing just 4,000 megawatts of power. No, count it. Okay. 4,000 megawatts of power from 1960 to 2015. It is between 2015 and 2018 that we can now say we have moved from 4,000 to 7,000, 3,000 megawatts plus 4,000 in 3 years. Now, if divide 1960 to 2015, divided by 3 years, and if we were just producing or generating 3,000 megawatts across those years, how many megawatts would we have now?
Okay, let me take on the last leg of this segment with Abdullahi. We talk about inclusivity. How inclusive has this government been?
What do you actually even mean by inclusive? I mean, in what sense? Nigerians were all one. That's what we were taught as kids growing up. We are one. Are you talking about, let us forget about our diversity, or our diversity should also be recognized in
everybody,
this
governance,
now,
youths, women.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, there is so much part of this government that has focused on that. For example, you have to look at the social program of this government. What this government is doing to youth, women, to the poor, to the vulnerables of the society. As I'm speaking to you, Omeni, there are about 8.2 million children that are being fed daily in about 24,000 schools in this country, providing both direct and indirect jobs under the school feeding program initiative of this government. That has two multi approaches. First, it helps to keep the children, the nutrient part of the children. You know the statistic from the UNICEF on about the malnourished children in this country. Now, second aspect, it also creates job. Now, apart from that, you talk about Empower, where young graduates below 30 years of age will actually, about 500,000 of them are given something to do, an empowerment, a job, either as extension officers, as teachers, and various fields. They are trained on the job, and they get allowances of 30,000 each of them every month, and it has been happening. The first batch was 200,000. The second batch was 300,000. Now all these are geared towards youths. Then we have the Jeep. That's the empowerment where people, women, and artisans were given loan of 10,000 to 100,000 naira without collateral. You don't need to come and say, I have to give a landed property to secure this loan. No, all you need to show is a form of identity or a certificate of of finishing from somewhere, school. It could be trade. It doesn't have to be a university. And you are empowered. Women, artisans, youths. So when you talk of this, and then don't forget the 5,000 conditional cash transfer to the poorest of the poor. More than 24 states have keyed in. People are benefiting. There are reports of women who have used this 5,000 to have climbed out of poverty. Now they have started producing. They are now contributing to the GDP of the country. Now, no wonder you will see a growth. You know, we are experiencing growth of GDP up at 1.9. It's something, like Nee kept saying, it's something to come out of recession and then keep growing as an economy. So when you talk of inclusion, what greater part of inclusion could this be, that a government that takes care of the women, the youth, the most vulnerable, the physically challenged, and almost everybody. And this country does not really, this government does not segregate about either based on ethnicity or religion. Okay. Everybody is protected under this government.
Thank you, Aliyu. I just hope I had all the time. That's about that on this segment. I think I enjoyed your line of thoughts. Let me quickly thank you, Deputy Coordinator, Buhari Media Organization and Attorney, Aliyu Abdullahi. Thanks for joining me on Insight.
Thank you for having me.
And Nii Akinseju, Investment and Financial Analyst. What will you gently say to Nigerians as we inch into 4 years of this administration? Is it congratulations or hope?
Congratulations.
Okay.
Congratulations, because we are going into a new Nigeria.
Okay. Thank you very much.